This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. Today we have a brand new case study with Nikhil, Katara and Himali Kothari, Readings in the Shed. Nikhil is a writer and a founder and artistic director of Readings in the Shed, and Himali is a creative director there. When she's not writing, she's talking about it in a creative writing workshops at Xavier's Institute of Communication, Mumbai. And obviously, we'll know more about them in the conversation. I'm so honored to have them on the show. Welcome, Himali. Welcome, Nikhil, to Audio Gyan.
Hi, Kedar. Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, Kedar.
Yeah. So this is a case study. I generally have three formats: Audio Gyan interviews, Audio Gyan case study, and Audio Gyan biographies. Case study is generally going deep into one subject or a particular project. And I wanted to understand how the journey of Readings in the Shed has been and document some of the nuances. So that's about it. And I've come up with a few questions. Hope they're worth your time as well.
I'm sure they will be.
Cool. So I'll start with the most basic question. What is Readings in the Shed? Just to set context and set the ball rolling. And why are you doing it? What's the motivation? What's the backstory like? Nikhil, you want to go first?
Thank you, Kedar, for that question. So basically, we were a group of people who used to read together. Essentially, a group of people who'd come together. And for the last few years, we've been reading together. And at one point of time, when Himali also joined in and our group became a little bigger, we started to think that where should we read? And at that point of time, we went and started performing our readings, literally performing our readings in a place called the Shed. This was in one remote corner of Warsaw. And since we were reading in there, it was called Readings in the Shed, quite literally. And then later in life, we realized that we can't localize ourselves because the dramatic structure in this city is such that it's no space becomes exclusive to a performative space. So the Shed kind of became an ephemeral kind of quality to it. And anywhere we could go and create a shed. Essentially, that's how it started. And more and more people joined in, it's like the caravan grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And very interesting people, very knowledgeable people, very modest people. And it's humbling to be in their presence, to just listen to the words that they have to say. And it's been about 3 years, and it's been the most meaningful 3 years of my life, I can say personally. Mm-hmm. It's a very valuable journey that we've had. And I've had a great privilege to have the partnership of Himali, who conceptualizes, we work together in creating multiple episodes of different readings and performances in different sheds. Essentially, that's in brief what the Shed is all about. If Himali, you want to add something that I've missed, please go ahead.
No, I think that's it, So basically, as far as the creation part of it is concerned, that is, that is what Nikhil and I do together. We work together, him as a director and also a writer, and me largely as writer. And we come together, we create these episodes and we perform, we get engaged theatre artists to come and perform them. And we have an audience of readers. That is very simply what the concept is. It's something which started in living rooms. We used to read at home. All of us sit together, open a book, open a play, read. And that's something Nikhil and a couple of other friends started. And it just blossomed into something which could be seen, which could be viewed, and which we could present to an audience. So that is how the Shed developed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I could have put the concept of the Shed more beautifully than Nikhil, what Nikhil just said. So yeah.
But was there any starting point that you started off with these books or these plays or this type of literature?
We didn't necessarily plan on, it's like it just happened to be one day that one of our readers said, guys, you have so many books and plays and, we've been reading for a decade now together. So essentially so many different, and we not necessarily read only plays. essentially as theatre artists, we read all forms of literature. We read poems, we read graphic novels, we've read magazine articles, essentially journalistic articles, and we found performance potential in almost every body of literature. It just needs a little treatment. That's how the entire journey started. Actually, one of the first things that we'd ever done was a play. But after that, not much has been a play. Because it turns out to be a performance which looks theatrical, but it is not exactly a play. Himali, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I was just saying that, exactly, like we did a play, and I don't know if we've done any other plays after that. So they made, like he said, what we've tried to do is make anything that we are doing look visually engaging, sound engaging. So when we talk about treating text, it's about treating text to make it look performative. You could start from a blog, you could start with a short story, you could start with like he said, like Nikhil said, you could start with a newspaper article. We've started with speeches. We've started with speeches and presented them as a performance. And when something becomes a performance and is played out on stage, I guess it takes the role of a play, whether it is one or not, so I think that is what we've always aimed to do. I think we both come from a school of belief that any information needs to be engaging before it becomes informative, and when something is engaging, it becomes informative automatically, because an engaging thing stays with you.
Correct.
It doesn't leave you. So it's always like, okay, we read this, we find it interesting. How do we present it in an interesting manner so that it stays with people? And that was the goal. And the text is, all text lends it to this concept.
Yeah.
Anytime.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Himali, a lot of the stuff that we perform is actually letters. A lot are letters.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating how much of the voice of people comes out in the form of an intimate communication in the form of letters.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And much of our performances have stemmed from letters written personally between people. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask you what any dominant, because before the pandemic, I had gone to listen to Atul Pethe at NCP, and he was narrating this book, Kimaya, I think. It's an architect who has written the book. It's a short book of 48 pages, 50 pages. But I had never seen such kind of performance in my life. I mean, you were just reading the book, but it felt as if it was like a complete play. So possibly who's listening to this kind of conversation for the first time, you want to give some examples. How does it pan out, or how does it sound, or what sort of treatment you give to letters, or letters between, say, even Tagore and Gandhi? Can those be narrated? Anything that you can share about?
Kedar, I think you gave us a good idea, yeah.
I recently heard a podcast where the entire conversation was happening, so I thought I'll just quote them.
Of course. So actually, when you just spoke about the performance you saw, no, Nikhil, I was reminded of the Chimamanda and Adichie book that Kayla D'Souza performed for us at Kothari. And it was, again, it's a book of, it's titled something as, it sounds as dull as a manifesto. So the word in the book, the title of the book is, has the word manifesto in it. So you would think, how do you perform a manifesto? It sounds so like drab, but it was so engaging. And it was just her sitting in a circle of an audience, sitting in the middle of the circle, moving a little here, a little there. She wasn't doing any kind of song and dance or anything. There's a little play of light, and it was just voice and the richness of the text. What the artist did, what Kayla did with the voice, and what the richness of the text already was. And that is enough, So when you spoke about the performance, so that was the first thing which came to mind. I'll let Nikhil tell you about what we've done with letters, because I know he loves them.
Essentially, Kedar, we've done love letters on 14th of February every year. Okay. So it started off very like a whimsical idea of what if we found letters of people of importance, specifically people of importance like scientists, like people of importance like politicians. Like politicians. And how do they sound? Like this was an experiment of some sort. And in some strange sense, I had this conversation with Himali 3 years ago, and NCPA had asked us whether you'd like to perform something. And 14th of February was coming. It was an essentially romantic day. So we started looking for letters. And Kedar, the letters have not ended. There's been so many letters we found.
Mm-hmm.
On a yearly basis, we perform those letters, and still there is so much left. I feel we can go on for centuries. We found letters by Albert Einstein. We found letters of love by Marie Curie. We found letters of love by the US president. Remind me of it?
Harding.
And scandalous letters. Like scandalous, passionate, extremely beautifully written letters, pining. Man, I would, even if I tend to kind of imagine some writer writing this, it might not be as authentic as probably these people in what circumstances they wrote. Like one letter I remember was by Marie Curie, which she wrote on the day or around about the day when she was going to win the second Nobel Prize. And the circumstances that kind of developed around it was fascinating.
It was not hers. It was not a very happily ever after love story. She was in love with a married man who had children, and we know her as the woman who, as a scientist, like Nikhil says, and a 2-time Nobel Prize winner. And she had been declared the 2nd-time winner, and she wrote to the man she loved and instructing him on how he should behave with his wife. So playing the very stereotypical almost character of, a jealous lover, who couldn't bear the thought of the fact that the guy she was in love with was with somebody else. So it's so strange, to bring those two personalities together. When you read them, they all sound like they are a house of multiple personalities, Like you think of Albert Einstein and you have this thing in mind, and then you read his letters, where he signs off by saying, "You're Johnny boy," and you just think, okay, which Albert Einstein is this? So stuff like that, yeah. So that was letters. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff around, fun and jokes, of course. It's, you want to make everything interesting, of course. But I think we've also tried to bring in a lot of meaning into the things which we do. We understand that fun need not be flimsy. So there's always a effort to bring in meaning into our performances. We've done shows to highlight things. So for instance, June 21st is Refugee Day, World Refugee Day. So on June 2019, we did a chapter on refugees. And, we got blogs by refugee children, and we brought them to the public eye. We've done shows on climate change. We've done that. I mean, as we go on, we'll tell you a bit more about it. But what I'm trying to say is that besides, of course, these are all fun. These have also been fun. So the whole idea being that how do you make this relevant to the audience? How do you entertain them, but at the same time also make it clear that, look, these are things which we need to discuss and need to be aware of, So, like we took the refugee chapter to a school as well, to a school in South Bombay for the students of grade 8, 9, 10. And that was a wonderful experience because this is a group of privileged children from a South Bombay school. And for them to be aware of the fact that there are many others, maybe of their age, who don't have anything close to these kind of privileges. So I think it works both ways.
Beautiful. So I have a lot of questions around it, but just to come to the next one was, in at least my exposure has been Katha, Kathan and Baithak. And I think there's something called as also Abhivachan. So these are some forms which I at least know exist in the theatre world. But, and again, my limited exposure to India, but is it like a format which is practiced globally? Or what is this format called? Does it naturally fit in this, or it's a separate genre of reading altogether?
So to answer that question, Kedar, it is a performance in its own right. It's a full-fledged performance. we add all elements. We add costume, we add makeup to a limited extent, we add set, we add as much as possible, all the elements of drama are there. The only difference is that the actor is reading, and we try to make the reading material as a part of the performance. So I don't know the complete extent of the three forms that you mentioned. From my limited knowledge, I understand they are sit-down reading formats mostly. But from what we are trying to do is add an element of movement and exploration of space in our reading format as far as possible. And we try to develop a space that will incorporate these elements as far as possible in our limited means. In the simplistic means that we can perform in a three-dimensional space, we will try to go as close to a play as possible.
And this happens across, as in like this format is practiced anywhere around the globe?
Well, I think Germany does. I think, so one very necessary, important element of our readings is music also. We usually have an accompaniment in some form who does live music while the storytelling happens, while the narration happens. I think there are elements like this in various other forms, even in India. But I'm not an expert to kind of comment how many forms exist, but I do think there are. And I know, as a matter of fact, Ramu sir has mentioned how this is a very interesting format in Poland, in Krakow, and in Germany. There are various forms in which people assemble, and it's a very important sacred kind of space where people come together and listen to a reading being performed.
Well, I'll just add to that. Actually, my journey in theatre is very short. Started with readings in the Shed. Nikhil's been there much longer. He's done stuff before that. And for me, when we first started discussing this, it took a while for me to wrap my head around it. It took a while for me to understand where he was coming from. But I have seen him design, he does the visualization, he does the designing of the performances. And it really, I haven't seen stuff like this much. Like he said, I'm sure there is, and I'm sure there's different stuff and there's, other kinds of things. But I've been very intrigued by the way he designs it, because I've learned a lot from watching that and from being a part of it. So for instance, I had never thought about something which we do a lot is we use for backdrops, we use slideshows, so we use slides to create texture in the text, because what that does is it helps us to work with minimal spaces, because you don't need huge spaces to have a slideshow, as long as you have a blank wall behind you, you can create a palace. You can create a sprawling forest. You can create anything, So I think that's something which has worked very well. And with set, we've tried to keep it very meaningful, So it's always like we've not just, we've gone to the extent where the stuff may not be like, my first thing was like, but the audience can't even see it. Why does it matter? But then I understood with my interactions with Nikhil, I understood that it did matter in the vibe that we are creating for the performer as well. So say if we are putting a book there, we've done things like wrapped, got the book which would be relevant to that period. So if the performance is based in the 1930s, was this title even published then? If it wasn't, we can't have it on stage. It doesn't matter that the audience won't even see it, but it does matter to the meaning that we are trying to bring. So, these small things are what I think lends itself to performance. And using light and music, I think the number of times the audience has walked away from with the sense of music in them. The number of people who've come and told us that, the music just added to the charm. And I think that's, again, I don't understand it as well as Nikhil does. So he's worked closely with the music, with the composer, with the artist who's bringing the music element, and together, they've come up with soundscapes and sound schemes for different parts of the text, which I think has been so important in adding that fourth dimension. to a performance, which is not something which is associated with reading. So, I think that's crucial.
Yeah, it must be quite an experience. I've never witnessed like a live one, but I'm really looking forward to.
We are really looking forward to doing a live one, honestly.
Yeah.
With all that's going around.
Yeah. We'll chat about this after the episode, definitely. You mentioned about as in this was like one of the lines in your website, text travels. I wanted to actually first compliment the details that you have put in. It actually reminded me of we have a quote like design is in the details. We say God is also in the details. So it may or may not be like explicitly shown this is what we are doing, but it's I can connect like a lot of things there. But so you mentioned about text travels. So I wanted to understand what do you mean by that? In a sense, with this modern day and age when everything is available online, you like do some preliminary research or read some Wikipedia pages and get to the crux of it. Not even crux, whatever, like just enough to talk about it. And then I was again asking Ramu sir that I want to pick up one person and just study in detail. How about Kabir? And he said, okay, then like there's nothing online. You just have to go to Uttar Pradesh and walk every street and corner. So like, what do you mean when you say text travels in the digital age and pre-digital era also? If you can give some examples or help me understand where you're coming from.
I think when we say text travels, one of the things to understand is that text can originate anywhere. It could originate, like you said, in a little village in UP. It could originate somewhere in the far-flung, in Japan, on the desk of Haruki Murakami, or it could originate here in Bombay in a building next to mine. But any text travels because for it to have importance and for it to have meaning, it needs to reach a reader. It needs to reach readers. And one thing is that the text has to travel to the reader, for it to become something. Otherwise, it's just words on a page, So the first thing for me is that how does text travel? Like I have consumed so much text, so many words in the years, in all the years, that I've been reading. And, when you're reading, you're always thinking, where did it start from? Which part of the world did it start from? And it has come to me. So that is one aspect of mine, of what I understand what text travels mean. Nikhil, you want to add to that?
So Kedar, one of the things why we started is, of course, text travels comes from a space that text, wherever it originates from, it will travel to you in some way or the other. And also you travel with the text. So essentially the way we kind of designed it in the beginning, at least that was a very ambitious exercise, was to do a chapter every month, which was from a different part of the world. So we started the first chapter with Chile. And then we got Ramu sir to do a chapter from Krakow, Poland. Then we went to UK. Then we went to Argentina. Then we went to basically as far as possible. If you can't go to the space, allow the text to come here so that you can experience the space and place in some way. Because not everybody is privileged to get into a plane and reach the space. But a text in its own right is a traveling experience because it has traveled from somewhere and it has reached us. And it gives us the permission to travel with it to another space. So it was an ambitious exercise. I don't know when, if at all, in our lifetime, we'll be able to complete the entire journey with this text. Because within this particular realm also, we found that we are inept to find so many texts, to decipher so many texts, to find translations of these texts. It is an incredible exercise to just see texts coming from different parts of the world and arrive here and very funnily make meaning with someone here. Someone here who has not experienced that life, someone who has not been able to engage with that part of the world, doesn't even know the laws, bylaws, this, that, and the other, but something happens. Yeah, and they laugh and they cry. I don't know what happens.
So basically, so we got these, like I was saying, we got these, German short stories, which had been translated into English, Hindi, and Marathi. and we performed them in Bombay. Now, we had never done anything except English before that. And we were like, what kind of audience is going to be here? It was such a big experiment for us, because is it going to be an audience which wants English stories, which wants Hindi? What if there are people who don't understand a particular language clearly enough, But we said, let's just go with it and let's see what happens. It was so strange. I remember, Nikhil, one person, there was this young girl in the audience, and after the performance, she came and she told us that the story which she most enjoyed was the Marathi story, despite the fact that she didn't know any Marathi at all. But the story still connected with her because of the way it was performed and something about the text. So maybe she knew like a spattering of Marathi, just, of living in Bombay and a few words. But it was a story she most connected with. I think for me, that's a big example of how, text can travel across boundaries. You don't need passports, visas, nothing. You just need to have a willing ear and acceptance for what is being said and just absorb it. And it makes sense. So that was such a incredible thing to hear when she said that. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Just to add one more thing.
Yeah, please.
This is also a very selfish exercise by both of us, because we both get to be pilots, in this fun journey.
Well put.
Because, so essentially anything that goes to the stage goes through a bunch of readings that we do together. And it's a meaningful exercise because we get to know so much. I remember in Found in Translation, Kedar, there was a point in which we were reading German.
Sorry to interrupt. Was this by Jayashree Joshi?
Yeah, so essentially it's at Goethe Institute, which is at the library, and the center is run by Jayashree ma'am.
Okay, achha. Because I have interviewed her long time back, and I thought she must, because she's like pro at German, Marathi, Hindi. So I thought she must have been.
She guided us a lot with this one.
Exactly. In fact, this set of stories which we've gotten together some of them were because Jayashree ma'am suggested, especially authors like Herta Müller, which we essentially were not exposed to at that particular point of time. But we found some. So I was just getting to the point that we were reading it together. And somewhere down the line, a Romanian village kind of came into question. And I suddenly looked up at Himali and said, for this longest time, I was reading this text and I didn't even realize this was a German text. This village ka naam here is suddenly making me realize that this is another text from another space. Otherwise, I was for the longest time thinking, this is somewhere here only. This is in my neighborhood. I know this person, That's the remarkable nature of that text to make it sound like it is our neighborhood, Of course, full marks to the translator here, who wrote such a beautiful translation that we couldn't decipher which part of the world it originated. The text traveled pretty well there.
And it didn't matter. It didn't matter, when we were reading it, that it was, it started in Germany or whatever. It didn't matter because it made sense to us here, sitting in Bombay. So, yeah.
I don't remember the word exactly, but Jayashree ma'am spoke about not just translator, but transculturator something. I don't remember the name, but it builds the context of the current culture after consuming that particular thing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a short break here. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, and wanted to add one more thing to this because last 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Ganesh Devi and we spoke about Praman Bhasha, what is language, what is a dialect. And he nicely put it saying that there are 2-3 definitions. The one which I look up to or I follow is that it's a means of communication. So there might be linguists who can say that this is the grammar, this is the syntax, and this is all the mathematics behind or the science behind it. But I look at it as a means of communication. So I can pick a lot of things which you guys are telling right now and fit it there, that how beautiful the journey must have been. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. You also have been saying that we choose text which is making or which bring relevance to today's India, or at least the audience, or at least bring some relevance. So like Or for that matter, when you said that I was not knowing that this is in German, and then understanding their context and then again mapping it or making it relevant today. So how does that happen? And do the type of guest dictate that? And generally, how do these dynamics work? I mean, you have a script, or you have a theme to narrate, or have a book. Now you go and identify a guest, or like what precedes what in the flow, if that makes sense.
So I would like to answer this question, and I'd like Himali to answer this question in the form of a case study of how we approached a specific day, which was the day of the World Refugee Day. And the entire research process that went around it, we actually looked up an article on Patricio Galvez, if I am correct.
Yeah.
And can you just elaborate on how you went about the research and what we did with the thing?
Okay, sure. So, Kedar, each text is different. How we treat it is different. How we go about the research is different. So, for instance, the case that Nikhil is talking about, Patricio Galvez, who was from Denmark, was it, Nikhil, or Sweden?
Sweden.
Sweden. He was from Sweden. And we came across his story through a Wall Street Journal article, written by a Wall Street journalist who's based in the Middle East. And she had written about Patricia's story, which was about how she was trying to, how he was trying to get his grandchildren back from Syria. His grandchildren who had been born to his daughter, who had run away from the country and who had, joined the ISIS in Syria and all of that. But leaving the story specifics aside, we wrote to her and we sought permission to use her article as the basis of creating a performative text. So using all the information that she had gathered and put in her article, we wanted to make it into a performative script and present it to our audience. And she was game for it. She said, sure, go ahead. She was, kind enough to let us use her article for this. And we created a script about Patricio, where Patricio became a character. The people around him became, sort of sounds and voices and all of that in his life. And it was him telling his story. That was the shape it took. We took it one step further, and when it was done, we wrote back to her and we said, we performed this and we just want to thank you. And it was received very well by the audiences. And she wrote back saying, I remember when I read that email call, Nikhil, I had my hair was standing up. It was so distinct because we wrote back to her and she wrote back within 5 minutes and she said, I'm so happy to tell you that Patricio managed to get his children back. And as I'm writing to you, he and the kids are flying back to Sweden from Syria. And for us, that was such a beautiful end to a story which had started in a very despondent way because it was a grandfather looking to get his children back. So sometimes some of the stories emerge in this fashion. We've done a birthday story by Haruki Murakami, where we wanted his permission to perform his story. So once we kind of narrowed down, we figured out, okay, which are the stories which are in the public domain, which are the ones which we need permission for. How do we go about getting that permission to read that text, So we wrote to his agent who's in America, and his agent in America gave us the permission to read Murakami's story to an audience at the NCPA, which we did in 2019 April, along with some stories which were written just for us. So some of our, well-wishers and friends who are very good, writers like Ramu sir and Renu Balakrishnan, who's also been like a guide and mentor for us, and Sapan also from theatre. So 3 of them wrote stories especially for us to perform. So sometimes that's the way the text comes out. Once we've decided on the text mutually between us that, okay, these are the stories that we want to tell on this particular day. Nikhil, you want to talk about how you go about figuring out who will perform these stories?
So essentially, once the text is prepared, after that, we start designing it. We don't spend too much time, Kedar. There's a certain element of spontaneity we try to look for. So essentially, all our performances more or less have been rehearsed only for 3 days, 3 to 4 days maximum. And we look up to our friends who essentially from theatre. And every month when we have performed with different theatre artists who've been very gracious to give us their time. And we look at people who will kind of support the text. We've had Yuki Elias perform stories from Pakistan. We've had Asif Ali Beg, who has been a regular collaborator with us. And he's done a very fantastic kind of interesting exercise where he performed an entire letter by Franz Kafka to his father. Essentially, that letter was 115 pages long. Himali treated it and got it down to size where we could perform it within an hour. And Asif solo performed this at Goethe Institute Max Muller Bhavan over 1 hour, 15 minutes. So each reading has its own character, has its own shape, has its own form. I can't tell you a generic way of how every reading can be done because essentially they're so different. When Ramu Ramanathan had performed the Polish poetry, which was from Krakow, I must say that, first of all, it was the most seamless exercise because we were like taking a snooze while Ramu did all the work. So that was a great experience. And it was one of our few sit-down readings because we needed a lot of context. Where are these people coming from? We don't know much. I didn't know so much about Krakow. We sat down and we read some of Wisława Szymborska and we read a little bit of the other poets that Ramu sir introduced to us. And then we kind of got some context. But that was a very different kind of reading. The readings which we've done for poetry are very different. The ones which we've done for a graphic novel. We performed a graphic novel. Now, how do you treat a graphic novel? It's so visual and so loud with color sometimes that you have to treat it in a certain way. So we got actually some of the graphics made and projected them on the screen while the artists were performing. So if a boom or a pow or a crow came, so there was a boom on the screen and the actor was going somewhere like that. So essentially all of them are very different.
I wish we could just name every artist that we've worked with, but it would become a very long podcast.
We need another podcast.
I mean, I think it's just been amazing how supportive, people can be to an exercise, which in sometimes, like Nikhil says, feels almost self-indulgent, because we are getting to do what we really like, which is read and read and read. And fortunate enough to have the kind of friends, and they found some meaning in what we've done, and they've been happy to come back a second time and a third time and work with us. So that's great. I think it just goes to show that there are enough people out there who want to be creatively challenged for the heck of it and for the fun of it, and it brings something to their daily life. Or to adds to the brilliant work that they're already doing. So that's so gratifying. It pushes you to come up, like, it's like, okay, I can't just, we just can't come up with anything and say, hey guys, here's the text, let's do this. Can't be as blasé about it, So we do try and make sure that the text that we are presenting to the artists who've deemed to work with us, that it is polished to the extent where it feels like, yes, this is good stuff, I want to read this,
In fact, I want to sorry to interrupt there. And I've done that multiple times especially with the creative side of people, that at what point in time do you know that this is polished enough? Everything which encapsulates the essence. So as Nikhil mentioned that the 115 pages, you shortened it. You fear losing out on a lot of things also. So how do you manage that? And typically again, my understanding, in artistic pursuits, you go in sort of negative. There are two ways, right? One is you just keep removing till you reach the abstract form, or then you just keep adding because everything is the same. Everything is just beautiful. So you just keep adding layers.
So I think what helps is that both of us are writers, So I think somewhere we understand that writing can be indulgent, but presenting cannot be, So I may want to write 500 pages about how beautiful a flower is, but the person reading it may not want to read 500 pages on how beautiful a flower is. So when we finalize a text, we also discuss the angle that we want to take. We decide, okay, this may be this big, it may be huge, but the angle we are taking is acute. The angle we are approaching it has a definite endpoint to it. So what is that endpoint that we are aiming for, and how do we arrive at that? That is our discussion. And then on basis of that, I mean, it's all very nice of him to say Himali brought it down to that, but it happens after a lot of discussion, and having that confidence that we will know what to leave out and what to keep. I'm also an editor, so I have great fun in editing people's work. I don't want to necessarily edit my own work, but I enjoy editing other people's work. And I know I've told him sometimes, like I remember when we were working on the Franz Kafka piece, or even Chimamanda Adichie's story, or even Murakami's birthday story. I remember saying, I can't believe I'm editing people like Murakami and all that. Like the dream come true, yeah. Like, nahi, ye words nikalo. So it's no, I mean, like, jokes apart, it's really about knowing where you're headed, right? And the fact that you don't have the time to take a detour. If you're headed there, you better just straight go there, because if you try to take a detour, the audience is going to be lost, right? You want to make sure they reach the end with you. So Nikhil, so you were saying that.
One thing I'd like to add, that give a writer a lot of time, then all these questions happen. I feel personally, give a writer a year to do a job, and he might tick 10, like in that sense. But give them a nice little deadline in a month, and they better do their job on time. It works, I feel. The pressure works. Essentially, you got to clock the hours. It's a manual laborer's job in that sense. You got to go and do and clock the hours and finish the work. And here in Readings in the Shed, one of the principles that we have is we have given ourselves the permission to fail. The permission to fail is a very incessant good quality to have personally in a theatrical journey. Because I remember one very beautiful article that Vijay Tendulkar wrote in the preface of the 6 plays that he had written. He says, when you enter theatre, your backside will burn, So might as well just accept that it will burn and go on with the journey. You have to create. And there is no particular point of time when you can be sure you've created a masterful piece of art. And for Readings, it's a journey for us, the actors, the performers, the sound engineers, the technicians, to really explore their craft. So to really explore the craft in that particular moment, in those 3 days, where everything you either fail or you do something, it usually something comes out of it. I've always seen something good comes out of it in that journey.
Sorry, I was just saying also feedback, So one is when we're developing the text, we are both giving feedback to each other as to what's working, what's not working, and quite brutally. That is the first thing. Second, we are also very open and very hopeful of feedback from our artists, from the performers. So when we do the first rehearsal and we do a first read, and we hand them the scripts that we prepared and they read it out, we are tuned into what is not sounding right to the ears and open to changing that instantly on the spot or before the second rehearsal. And we are also very open to, guys, what is it that's not working for you, and what is it that you would like us to change? So I think that's something which has helped us to stay on track, as you say.
Yeah, superb. I have actually last 2 questions, and this is just to conclude this particular thing, this particular podcast. But yeah, as you say, text travels, and we'll connect back very soon. But just 2 things which I wanted to ask was, one is, yes, it's a very research heavy, time consuming project, but with the new availability of texts easily available, there's a chance that a very enthusiastic but like probably less informed or not well researched person might execute this. And then there is a chance of you actually documenting something which you perceived is what that person is saying. So there's always that lost in translation wala bit where you transfer something different to the next generation. how do you not do that? Or how do you, any tips for like a person who want to indulge in similar format? Any guardrails to be aware of it?
From what I understand, Kedar, you're saying that a text written by an authoritarian intention, something gets lost in interpretation. Am I correct?
Yes.
In deciphering it?
Yes.
Now, personally, there is a kind of a philosophical space to kind of answer that question, just to think about it from the point of view of how does a text be received, instead of what was the authoritarian intention. Essentially, there's a very beautiful article which actually has the title which is saying author is dead, saying that the author basically doesn't even exist after he has written the text. Essentially, it's the reader. And if the reader doesn't engage and the intelligence doesn't engage with the text, what is the text for? It won't even make meaning and sense in that particular sense until the intelligence of the reader doesn't meet the text. So essentially, in that translation or in that interpretation, actually what is found is much more important. What is found in that, because in that finding comes context, it comes religious, socio-political, economical status, all of it kind of is the interpretation of the text. The text in itself with the authorial intention is only one thing, but with its interpretations, it has multiple meanings, and meaningful content will travel. In the sense, it will mean something, whether it be written 400 years ago as Shakespeare wrote, and still is meaning something to so many people in these circumstances. And we're still watching it. We're still living it. It's a very, very kind of meaningful exercise. If one sees just from the Kantian perspective, the third critique, which Kant wrote, is the critique of judgment, where the judgment is from the reader's point of view, where the judgment is from the person of how we receive a certain piece of text, or how we receive something, which per se is way more valuable than genius. The value given to genius at some points of time over exceeds what the value is given to the reader just to make intelligent meaning out of a certain kind of exercise. Himali, if you want to add something.
Genius.
Yeah. In fact, I interviewed Ashish Avikuntak, and he said something similar where his films are way too abstract. And I'm saying a lot of people give like WTF after watching his film. And he said that's fine, but the films are designed or conceptualized in a way to observe what is happening to you while watching the film, and it is not about the film actually. So it's a brilliant way to put it, and I can understand what you are also saying now. Yeah.
I hope I said something.
Yes, obviously, yeah. Yeah. But it's kind of tricky at this stage of my life to. So I like, in fact, I judge myself. Am I understanding this text correctly, or am I? And it's fine. There's no judgment there, but still it happens, right? Is this what the person wanted to say? और मैं थोड़ा सा intellectual trip कर रहा हूँ, क्या कर रहा हूँ? It's yeah, cool. And this last one is more of a hygiene question. What next? What's the plan? What are the future? How does the future look like for Readings in the Shed? Any upcoming?
So Himali,
it's a mask.
Essentially what had happened. No, we were essentially like various people in the world. We were in the midst of pandemic. We were doing a performance a month, and suddenly we realized we can't do that anymore. So all live spaces are still wiped out. NCPA. So we had majorly a lot of collaborations going for us. We had NCPA as collaborators. We have Kothari Institute, Maximilian Bhavan, who has collaborated. We have collaborated with Polish Institute, New Delhi. And of course, we started a course with Wilson College where we kind of made a course around Bachelor's of Vocational Training, Theatre and Stagecraft. So we have a course over there. So a lot of things started working out for us, but essentially what happened is performative spaces shut down. At that point of time, we were like, oh God, now we can't perform. There is no stage. What do we do? And for 2 months, silence. We are looking on Instagram channels, like wasting our time. And then I think one day we decided on a whim that we will make a film. Okay. I remember I think we were just having a conversation, Himali and me, and we were saying, now what,
It was for our birthday. It was for the second birthday of Readings. And we were like, what are we going to perform this year, man? There's no stage where are we going to do the birthday? So yeah.
And we had a full plan for the birthday because again we had gone back to our mentor Ramu sir, and he was like devising something. We'll say we'll chill. He'll do all the work, and then there was no stage. There was nothing available. In that point of time, we said, "Chalo, now nothing doing. We have to do something. Otherwise, this will be like readings in the bed instead of readings in the shed because we were not getting out of bed." So we started making films, Kedar, and we made short films, and we made about 8 to 10 short films for Goethe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan. Very grateful that they have supported us all through our entire journey, and they gave us the opportunity to explore the space where we converted, again, about 7 to 8 very interesting texts into short films. Some of them are available, all of them are available on Goethe Institute's channel. It's called Blurbs. The idea came because Himali came up with the idea, hey, these don't look like films. These don't look like cinema. They are basically the backside of a book. It's a blurb. It's just an introduction into the space that is going through. So that what we kind of latched on to has given us a first step into something which we never intended to do. So explore the medium of telling stories through the screen. And we've gotten interesting opportunities. In fact, the last year, the only performance that we did live was on 14th February 2021, where NCP opened briefly for a while. We performed Letters of Love and it shut down. Now, that was the only performance we did. And coincidentally, at that point of time, we had a cinematographer who had shot that entire thing. And then we sent it to an international theatre festival. And it got screened at the theatre festival in Cleveland, in America. And there, again, the text traveled. I don't know how it traveled.
And this at a time when I have not traveled, 5 kilometers beyond my house. Yeah. So, Letters of Love has like made it across many countries and oceans and reached wherever, and we are like stuck. We can't even go to the nearest coffee shop.
In fact, the first 3 tickets that we sold, one was from Australia, one was from UK, and one was from America. I was like, 3 countries are watching our play. Initially it used to be Malabar Hill people who used to watch it. So it was interesting as a scenario, Kedar, that we suddenly were put in a position where we had no opportunity but to explore a medium to tell stories. And we found beautiful insight into this medium. And then we kind of collaborated with some of our friends in the UK to pitch for a project for the Asia-Europe Foundation. And now we recently have created a film for the Asia-Europe Foundation on how is it to create work with distance involved, Himali. And so basically what is the project is about 3 to 4 artists from India and 3 to 4 artists from the UK have come together to create a film which was half shot in India, half shot in the UK. So there are 2 writers, Himali was one of them and one was from the UK. Then there are 2 actors and so on and so forth. So all of these have given us very interesting opportunities. I would say it has been an interesting year for us.
I think it's been all about adaptability, I think that's what all of us, whether it's readings in the shed, Nikhil, me, or anybody, we've all just been like, okay, how do we continue to remain relevant at a time when everything's becoming irrelevant, So I think just in that bit to remain relevant, we've managed to adapt and found ways. And I think when you look for ways, you find ways. And these opportunities were there. Maybe they were there, but we never looked at them. But when we didn't have a stage, we said, okay, now how do we create a stage? And that's what happened. We also recently, for this birthday, we launched a book which has anthologies, which is an anthology of short stories by Nikhil and by me. Because we said, okay, we can't bring people to tell them stories, so why not send them stories? Go read. So we wrote original stories and published them into a book, and that's another way, right? So I don't know if we would have done that if we wouldn't have been forced to. We would have continued to do what we were doing. So it's a nice way to push your boundaries and say, okay, if not this, then what? So that's what we've been doing for this last year and a half, just finding the if nots.
Yeah.
Kedar, guess the name of the book.
Short readings in the shed.
Well, remove the short.
It is only readings in the shed.
So we are very creative as far as the name is concerned. Trust me, the stories are better.
Yeah, essentially all of our chapters, whenever we performed, everything, the title always is Readings in the Shed Chapter 1, Readings in the Shed Chapter 2. Nothing changes there.
We went with the flow.
Yeah. Superb. Cool. I think we'll wrap this one. It's been fun talking to you. Lot of... Yes, you want to say something, please?
Yeah, I just also wanted, to talk very, very quickly about this project that we've launched, which we are very excited about, which Ramu sir has helped us to mentor. Ramu sir, it was his idea, and we are just being the channel for it. He felt that we needed to do stuff to highlight the expansive playwriting that is happening in this country and has been happening for the last 20 years. I think somewhere we are also contained within the spaces that we inhabit, right? So I know what my friends are writing. I may know what's being performed at Prithvi or NCPA or wherever I go. But there's a lot of stuff happening in other parts of the country as well. So for this first leg of this project, which is called Project 87, we've shortlisted 87 plays written in English in India from different parts of the country. We've found some means to shortlist them. I mean, there are probably 400-500 plays which have been written, but we've narrowed it down and brought it down to 87 just because we like the sound of the number 87, no other reason. And we brought it down to 87, and we launched this almost now. I think it's close to 1.5 months that we've been doing this. We highlight the play, we create a little art piece about the play, we post it on our social media, and on the social media of Project 87, we write a short summary, we write the accolades. It's we remind people of the accolades it's received. If it is a play which has been published by any in writing, then we share that. The goal is very simple, that let us be more aware of all the playwriting that is happening in this country. Let us just be a little more aware about it. It's as simple as that. These are not plays that Nikhil, me or Ramu sir have written or are associated with. These are very simply plays which exist, and which we need to know about. And so far for me, it's been an enriching journey because the research has opened my eyes to people and to the kind of writing that I had no idea was happening. So we've gone all the way back to 2000. So, from 2000 to 2020, I mean, it's a tremendous the kind of stuff that has been created, in the minds. And hopefully, somebody will notice more of these plays will be recreated, unearthed, or maybe people buy a book and sit together in a room and read it. They'll pick up a play and they'll read it. And so many people have supported us in getting information on this. Factor started from Ramu sir, and then, everybody from, QTP to Thespo to, the editor, the people who are associated with Hindu, all of them have, when we reached out, given us information to create this list. So, yeah, that's something which I'm I think, very proud to be a part of. Hopefully archiving something which will have meaning for a long, long time, as long as it's there. So yeah, that's something which I wanted to share. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm following it on Instagram, and I was going to mention about it, and it's almost invaluable thing that you're doing because, again, thoda sa philosophical jayenge, to time is going to get faster and faster, and things are going to be just crazy in the coming years and decades. So documenting something like this is invaluable. It's amazing. So yeah, we should do one series or something around this Project 87 in the coming time.
Absolutely, Kedar, anytime. Yeah, I mean, seriously, I if it can bring, we would love to showcase it and spotlight it a lot more. So I look forward to that with you for sure.
Yes, sure.
Thank
Let's
you so
connect
much.
on that. Cool. Once again, thanks a lot to both of you for giving time, and it was a real pleasure having you.
Thank you, Kedar.
Thank you, Kedar, so much.
Okay, thanks. That's it. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.